If you're familiar with K-pop, you may have seen a clip here and there of your favorite idols throwing up a peace sign for a photo, only to awkwardly fumble with their fingers, change the number they're holding up, and then promptly move on to something else entirely. And if you've been familiar with K-pop for a little bit longer, you'd know that this strange behavior tends to happen around election season in South Korea. The numbers aren't random. They can be interpreted as covert endorsements of political candidates, as numbers are used to identify political parties and candidates during elections. What's interesting is not necessarily that idols avoid these gestures, it's that they know they have to avoid them at all. They understand that something as mundane as the position of their fingers can be interpreted politically, and that being perceived as endorsing a candidate can have consequences for their public image. In other words, K-pop idols are not unfamiliar with the idea that something innocuous can have political meaning. They are, however, often expected to behave as though that political meaning ends where Korea's borders do. Today, I wanted to discuss a pillar of K-pop expectations: the standard of remaining apolitical. As I'm sure many of you know, K-pop sells itself as politically neutral. Agencies have gone to great lengths to cultivate an image that appeals to everyone regardless of ideology. They've done this by forbidding idols from expressing political opinions, even to the extent of avoiding party colors or certain numbers during election season. This is done, like so many other decisions within K-pop, to maximize profit. Whether you like it or not, a person's political stance carries a lot of weight. It signals where they stand on serious issues, and those positions can often bleed into the public's perception of their moral character, a concept with great impact on an idol's standing. One of the biggest shifts of the entertainment industry in the 2010s has been the desire to support people who align with your values, or more importantly, to avoid supporting those who don't. The correlation between political beliefs and morality is highly contested. Wherever you go online, people constantly go back and forth on whether there is a connection there. Personally, I fall into the camp that does believe they are connected. Your stance on how a government should run its country, how laws should be applied, how marginalized groups should be treated, how tax dollars should be spent, and how conflict should be approached says something about your character. Try as people might, I don't think a topic as serious and consequential as politics can simply be agreed to be disagreed upon. This is not a matter of liking apples over oranges. It's how you believe society should be structured. But interestingly, the K-pop industry seems to think that it can avoid this complication altogether if idols just don't say anything. But of course, the obvious issue with K-pop's political stance is that politics don't really care whether or not you want to participate. Contrary to the belief, politics isn't confined to the election season, or to colors, or to numbers. There is meaning in any number of clothing, items, and symbols that you interact with on a daily basis. Being ignorant, or avoiding that fact, isn't the get-out-of-jail-free card that so many seem to think that it is. But betting on that logical leap is why K-pop keeps hitting cultural faux pas and suffering the backlash for it. The cultural appropriation of Black American culture, as an example. K-pop has dealt with the politics issue by simply not acknowledging it. Not speaking about it is an obvious one, but they also have a tendency to treat anything that they come across as apolitical as well. They strip many heavily political concepts of their origin to maintain distance and safety, and expect the audience to follow along. And if you'll allow me to use the example I just put forth, they oftentimes do this with hip-hop. But a road bump that K-pop keeps running into is that the audience won't follow along with the charade, and it bulldozes into full-on controversies. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that these controversies usually fall into one of two categories. Either politics is projected onto a situation, or the politics were already there, and the idol simply didn't recognize them because they've been trained to treat everything as politically ambiguous. With the first type, I would like to use two examples. Wonnie from Reseen, and more questionably, Karina from aespa. Starting with Wonnie. Earlier this year, Wonnie found herself at the center of an unexpected political controversy. During a visit to her hometown, she and the production team were startled by a loud clattering noise. Reacting instinctively, she spoke in her native dialect and ended her sentence with "no." And this is important, because unfortunately for Wonnie, that particular sentence ending has also become associated with a notorious far-right online community in Korea. While the suffix has long existed as a normal feature of her regional dialect, its adoption by the extremist group has led some people to view its use with suspicion. An NBC producer publicly connected her speech to the extremist group, and the conversation rapidly snowballed. The debate quickly expanded beyond entertainment circles and into mainstream political discourse. News outlets covered it, politicians commented on it, and what began as a split-second reaction to a loud noise became a national discussion over whether ordinary people should continue using a dialect feature that now carried political messaging. Thankfully, the overwhelming public response was to defend Wonnie. And the only reason I say thankfully is because usually people are chomping at the bits to rip a female idol apart. People from her town and speakers of the same dialect pointed out that no had been a part of their everyday speech long before any political movement co-opted it. The consensus became less about whether Wonnie held extremist views and more about whether an entire regional dialect should be abandoned because of its association with a fringe political group. In other words, politics wasn't something Wonnie introduced into the conversation, but it was projected onto her speech. Karina's controversy, while a little less clear-cut, I do think belongs in this category. During South Korea's election season in 2025, Karina uploaded a series of photos of herself wearing a red zip-up jacket with the number 2 on it. Under normal circumstances, there would have been absolutely nothing noteworthy about the post. But because the election was underway, many interpreted the combination of the color red and the number 2 as signaling support for the conservative People Power Party, whose candidates were represented by those identifiers. Unlike Wonnie's controversy, this one is admittedly more ambiguous. Choosing to post a photo with coincidental markers of a political party during an election season seems to have been a stretch too far for some people. It's been argued back and forth whether Karina intentionally did this as a way to show support, or if she was just that out of touch with what was going on in the country at the time. Ergo, reference the example that I mentioned at the very top of this video. With so many idols being so afraid to show any possible identifiers of a party, it kinda shocked people that Karina seemed so out of the loop that she didn't see how this might come across. Even so, the controversy still does have a same underlying dynamic. The outrage wasn't fueled by something Karina explicitly said or advocated for. It was driven by the political meaning people assigned to visual cues that, outside of that context, would have been completely unremarkable. In both cases, the idols became political symbols without making political statements. The controversy emerged not because of what they believed, but because of what other people believed their actions represented. But projection is only half of these controversies. Sometimes, the idols straight up should have known better. Take Mark Lee as an example. Earlier this year, Mark left SM Entertainment after 10 years to start his own company. While in what I assume were preparations for upcoming promotions, he appeared on a variety show wearing a shirt featuring the Confederate flag of all things. Whether Mark himself understood the flag's history is almost besides the point. The Confederate flag isn't a design that has lost its meanings over the years. They've instead evolved to symbolize the Confederacy, slavery, and white supremacy in the United States. It is still used to this day to mean those things. Immediately, he was inundated with criticism and backlash over an objectively dumb and avoidable situation. People raised his experience in Canada and America as proof that he should have known better, but I'm pettier than that. I think that even if you're not intimately aware of a country, you shouldn't go walking around wearing flags that you don't know the meaning of. And following that line of thinking, my opinion about this situation is admittedly more extreme than others. As I've said thus far, idols are famously stifled by their companies while under contract. And supposedly, the moment Mark is off of the leash, he is completely caught unaware wearing a white supremacist shirt. Right. I'm supposed to believe this was completely coincidental. Okay. Jungkook also found himself in a remarkably similar situation. He chose to wear a black cap with familiar lettering, referencing the sack of shit currently sitting in the presidential seat of the United States. The optics of this could legitimately not be worse. I'm aware that parodies of the Make America Great Again slogan are popular, but unless it's a version that jokes about the idiocy of the slogan itself, it's always in extremely bad taste. Not to mention the history between Japan and Korea, Jungkook's country of origin. Given Japan's history of imperialism and the continued tensions surrounding historical revisionism, many interpreted the slogan as echoing Japanese nationalist rhetoric. Needless to say, it pissed off different groups of people for different reasons. Again, I carry the same opinion I did with Mark Lee. If you are not intending to make a political statement, please do not put a political piece of clothing on your body and then walk around in public with it. But perhaps no example illustrates this better than Chaeyoung from Twice. Within the span of a few months, she wore 2 different shirts that sparked international backlash. One featured imagery associated with the QAnon conspiracy movement, and the other displayed a swastika as a part of a Sid Vicious graphic. Unlike the Mark Lee situation, the conversation shifted to whether Chaeyoung understood what she was wearing. In the eyes of fans, she had plausible deniability given her nationality and supposed ignorance of any history outside of it. But even if I were to take Chaeyoung's word for it and concede that she truly did not know, it does show a remarkable lack of knowledge. I'm well aware that Europe and the US are not the center of the universe. Sometimes, when these discussions are had, it's easy to take what I would consider common knowledge to not be that. I don't even expect that celebrities from all over the world have to be experts in Western history so that they can circumvent these issues. But I mean, a crash course couldn't hurt. Despite the reputation of Americans being overly sensitive, it really isn't hard to appeal to an American audience. A really unfortunate fact about K-pop idols and celebrity culture in general. Most people are okay with you having problematic views as long as you don't showcase those problematic views in a very evident and obvious way. Don't say the N-word, don't spout overtly homophobic rhetoric, and no swastikas. As long as you memorize that, you're doing better than 90% of the celebrities out there. This is by no means the extent of what you could learn to be more culturally digestible, but it's a good start if you are currently wearing a Confederate flag shirt. And if we're talking about the swastika specifically, I would much rather people accuse me of making a terrible decision than argue that I, somehow, failed to recognize one of the most infamous symbols of hate in modern history. What a way to backhandedly call someone stupid. Okay, so, game time. What does the Confederate flag, a MAGA-inspired slogan, QAnon imagery, and a swastika all have in common? Do I have any takers? Any takers out there? Well, if you're not Chaeyoung, then you probably got it right. They are all highly political symbols, but they're also not Korean. A symbol can have decades, even centuries of history attached to it, but if that history is not Korean, it is often treated as though it exists outside of the idol's responsibility to understand it. K-pop often gets a bad rap for cultural appropriation of Black American culture, and I am not here to argue against that. My stance, however, is that the issue is broader than that. Or rather, that cultural appropriation resides under a bigger umbrella of issues. K-pop will not acknowledge anything that has history or political intent and/or messaging if it is not of Korean origin. Some may say, well duh, K-pop is Korean pop, what else do I expect? And this may have been a valid but pessimistic retort that could have worked a decade ago, but not in the current day, where K-pop is composed of fewer Korean idols than ever, and they are doing everything they can to break into the mainstream pop sphere, a triumph that only BTS have accomplished to this day. The guard of non-politicalness has served 2 purposes. It protects the industry's pockets, sure, but it also gives an idols an escape route when they inevitably encounter political landmines. Because making a political statement is treated as inherently scandalous, the first question in many controversies becomes whether an idol intended to make one. Did they know what the symbol meant? Did they understand the history behind it? Was it their choice or a stylist's? Intent matters, of course, especially when determining responsibility. But the obsession with intent can become a convenient way to avoid the more uncomfortable question of meaning. The distinction between intention and meaning becomes especially important in an industry that has trained the audience to believe that every detail of an idol's presentation is meaningful when that meaning is flattering, but meaningless when it becomes inconvenient. The question of intent plays a big role in deciding if a blank idol has committed an irreparable offense. An irreparable offense counts towards one of the K-pop industry's most valuable commodities, an idol's image. Everything in K-pop is built upon the illusion of perfection, perfect performance, perfect looks, perfect vocals, perfect person. Without the reliance on perfection, much of the glamour and draw that idols have is ruined. Even the title that they use to define this very specific type of performer is in aid to this project, an idol, a person deserving of worship. Putting aside the problematic idea of worshipping literally anyone, another problem lies in how this is done. A perfect person is impossible to define because it changes from person to person. So instead, companies work to create blank slates that you can project onto. They operate on the halo effect. While the idol in front of you has so many good qualities, maybe they're good at singing, maybe rapping, maybe dancing, maybe they have great stage presence, maybe they're humble, maybe they're funny, and maybe, just maybe, that extends elsewhere in their personality. Maybe they are a good person. Okay, so we know why companies do this. But why do K-pop fans tolerate it, and in some cases, enforce the same expectation from their idols? It would be one thing if companies manufactured politically neutral celebrities while audiences resented that restriction, as audiences often resent other forms of corporate control. I mean, how many times have we seen people get online and say how much they hate that idols are expected to debut underage? But many fans actively participate in maintaining a K-pop idol's neutrality. I think the answer to that question can be encapsulated with a simple phrase. For some people, K-pop is escapism. And I know that because that's exactly what happened to me. When I first came across a Stray Kids song, I was in my first year of high school. I had just moved house and I was starting at a new school, and I was terrified because I was terrible at making friends. Predictably, it did not go well. I was awkward, I was already into anime at that time, I had the gamer vibes going on, but I did shower, so I had that going for me. And like a lot of teenagers, I was deeply uncomfortable with myself, with my own body, and I had absolutely no idea how to exist inside of it. I tried my best to fit in with people, and eventually I made some connections, but I was never really part of an in-group. I was a stray kid. Yes, you can call me corny now, throw tomatoes, yes, I'll accept all of it. And so, like so many other lonely kids do, I went online. And eventually I stumbled across something I'd never really encountered before. K-pop. And here was this group of 9 kids who were not that much older than me, and who were chasing their dreams together. They looked like the best of friends. They were struggling sometimes, they still looked cool though, they made music I thought was sick, and somehow they were still keeping their heads above water. And as embarrassing as it is to admit now, seeing that made me feel like maybe I could do it too. I am 23 now, and I am so different from the person I was back then, but that version of me is still a part of my journey, and I genuinely feel like I went through some of that with Stray Kids. There were periods where I wasn't nearly as invested in the group. I would definitely say that my interests ebbed and flowed, but I always tried to keep a pulse of what exactly was happening. And when I was having a bad day, or a bad week, or just needed something to make the world feel a little less shitty, I had this pocket of positivity I could fall back on. I would never credit Stray Kids with making my life better. I did that myself. But it felt good to have somewhere to go while I was figuring my own shit out. Somewhere I could temporarily step away from everything that was happening around me and immerse myself in something completely different. I didn't have to think about my relationships, or parental issues, or politics, or my body, or the news. Nothing. They were my escape. Recently, there have been TikToks and posts popping up echoing a similar sentiment of how there is a correlation between how shitty your life is at the moment and how entrenched in K-pop you are. I am willing to admit this may be a frequency illusion on my part, but I have yet to see a single person disagreeing with the premise itself. And I get it. I see where they're coming from. They use K-pop in much the same way that I did to escape the circumstances they're faced with. When you're discovering K-pop, it feels like an entirely new world. There's so much to learn and digest. You're constantly being served with more performances, more groups, more idols, more memes, more variety shows. It's like a fucking buffet. And on top of all of that, there is a community pre-built that you can dive headfirst into that loves the group as much as you do, who's always accepting new people, basically just a slot that you can slide yourself right into. But when you are inevitably confronted with the fact that this world doesn't actually separate you from the one you were trying to escape, people get defensive, as you'd expect. If you're obsessed with K-pop and you're trying to surround yourself with positivity, away from whatever it is that is burdening you, someone pointing out that your idol did something fucked up is annoying. They're effectively a fly that you need to swat so you can go back to eating your food. The thing that was supposed to be your escape is being questioned, and you're being asked to engage with the exact same complicated world you were trying to get away from. And I do think that's where some of the strongest reactions, and I guess I'm pointing specifically to defenses, of these controversies come from. It's not necessarily that fans don't care about politics. Well, I'm sure some of them actually don't care, but I think it's more likely that the majority don't want politics here. It's a way of saying, I don't want this to matter here. I think this is the most generous position that I can grant fans who are completely resistant to hearing any criticism about their groups, whether it be from the mundane opinions of music to more serious and complex issues like politics. I understand wanting to protect the thing that makes you happy. If K-pop is one of the few places where you feel comfortable, where you have a community, where you can forget about everything for a few hours, of course you don't want someone coming in and ruining that. But there is a difference between wanting an escape and demanding that the thing you're escaping into be free of reality. K-pop doesn't exist in a vacuum. Nothing does. The idols are real people. The clothes they're wearing come from somewhere. The music they're making comes from somewhere. The cultures they borrow from come from somewhere. You can choose not to engage with those things, but you can't make them disappear, and you certainly can't prevent others who are willing to engage have those discussions. The industry has a vested interest in pretending that K-pop is politically neutral because it makes the product easier to sell. Fans have a different reason for wanting to believe it, and those two motivations happen to work together incredibly well. Oh boy, this one was a doozy, but we have reached the end of this video. Thank you for being along for the ride, and I'd appreciate any feedback or your thoughts on the topic. As always, that'll be it from me for now. See y'all later. Bye-bye!